In this third piece of Reconstruction, what we want to do now is take a look at how the radicals in Congress intended to run Reconstruction, and we want to look at the first major constitutional crisis of the post-Civil War period, the Tenure of Office Act, and the impeachment trial of Andrew Johnson. As we get started with this, let's review quickly the ideas of military reconstruction. The Military Reconstruction Act of March 1867 turned the South into 5 military districts. The only part of the South not underneath this idea was Tennessee. And Congress kind of gave Tennessee a pass because it had already ratified and agreed to enforce the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, giving the newly freed blacks civil rights and all of the ideas of citizenship. Well, the 10 remaining states were divided into 5 military districts. Each of those military districts had a commanding officer, normally an army officer, who essentially became the military governor of that district and ran that district under militia rule. He laid the law down. He arrested those who did not follow procedures. He said, this is not going to happen any other way than what Congress has said. Now, Congress has said 3 things have to happen. 1, there has to be a new constitution in each state. That constitution has to be created by people 21 or older, male, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, etc. Okay? So, their expectation would be that blacks, Native Americans, others who were part of the process would be included in this idea. 2, the new constitutions in each of these states had to guarantee that blacks would receive the right to vote without penalty, without literacy tests, without poll taxes, without intimidation that had been rampant in the southern states after the war. The third thing that had to happen was that each of the states had to ratify the 14th Amendment to the Constitution and guarantee civil rights to all. Now, process was easier said than done, and Congress wanted to take its all due diligence in making sure that these southern states were ready for readmission to the Union. In other words, this was going to be on their terms, not on southern terms. Well, along with military reconstruction, along with command of the Army, there's a brewing controversy in Washington, D.C. Andrew Johnson wants to flex his power as President of the United States. He's now been president for almost 2 years, and he decides that he wants a cabinet that is more in line with his ideas. And there are 2 central problems. One is Secretary of State William Seward. Again, the guy who was knifed in the attacks on the night Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The second critical thorn was Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, the guy who stood over Abraham Lincoln's dead body and uttered the famous words, "Now he belongs to the ages," the morning after John Wilkes Booth's attack on the president. Well, Congress gets wind that Johnson wants to remove these 2 radical Republicans from their cabinet positions. Naturally, being political allies of Congress, Congress decides to step in and do something about this. They don't want to see their friends out of a job. They don't want to see their friends out of office. They want them to help control President Johnson. So they passed the Tenure of Office Act. The Tenure of Office Act basically stated that if the Senate had confirmed a person to a position, the Senate would then have the only right to fire that individual. Now, problem with the Tenure of Office Act is that it's in direct violation of the Constitution. If you look at the setup of the executive branch in the Constitution, the president has the right to appoint his cabinet officers and fire them at will. Congress consults and approves nominations, but that's where their job is supposed to end. So the Tenure of Office Act is essentially a power grab. It's an attempt by Congress to say, we don't trust this president, and we don't trust the way he does things, so we are going to stop this and say, okay, we are going to take control. If we confirmed you to an office, we're the only ones that can fire you. So, March, along with the Military Reconstruction Act and the Command of the Army Act, they passed the Tenure of Office Act. Now, Johnson holds up his arms, starts screaming and yelling, and says, hey, this is unconstitutional. I'm going to veto this. And for the 35th time in his 2 years as president, Johnson pulls out the veto pen and vetoes a congressional act. And for the 35th time in congressional history during this time period, Congress votes to override the president's veto. So the Tenure of Office Act becomes law. Now, there's a conflict. Most constitutional lawyers will say this is unconstitutional. But unless there's a trial case that brings the Supreme Court into consideration of this situation, the bill stands as law. Well, Johnson decides, okay, I'm going to make the change. I'm going to fire Stanton. And during a recess of Congress, he suspends Stanton and appoints Ulysses S. Grant, the victorious general in the Civil War, as the new Secretary of War. Well, Congress gets back into service after its recess, and it goes 3 shades of crazy. It says, well, no, you didn't suspend him, you removed him. Therefore, you violated federal law. You violated the Tenure of Office Act, which was passed by us. Oh, we overrode your veto. It's law. You broke it. You therefore have committed a high crime and misdemeanor against the United States. Therefore, because we don't like you, we don't trust you, and you have been nothing but evil to us, we are going to attempt to remove you from office. And for the first time in the history of the country, impeachment articles are passed against Andrew Johnson in the House of Representatives. Now, here's the deal. Remember, Congress has a 2/3 majority of radical Republicans in both houses of Congress. They believe that the passage of these articles of impeachment are going to lead to a trial, a guilty verdict, and ultimately Johnson's removal from office. So, 1868, impeachment trial begins. Everyone believes it's a foregone conclusion. Everyone believes that Johnson is going to be impeached and removed, and it's going to represent a power grab for the radical Republicans. Because if they're successful in removing Johnson, what happens when Congress doesn't like the next person serving as president? They create a precedent that makes it more difficult for presidents to survive. It's a power grab. If Congress succeeds, look out. Well, the New York Times, the New York Post, major newspapers across the country are publishing political cartoons on their front pages, assuming that Johnson's going to be removed. Well, and he would have been, except for one vote in Congress. A senator by the name of Edmund Ross of Kansas, radical Republican, not really known as a great speaker or great orator, or even someone involved in Congress. Except his political conscience says he can't remove Johnson.